What was supposed to be a routine landing at one of America's busiest airports turned into absolute chaos in seconds. A passenger jet touched down at LaGuardia. A fire truck was on the runway, and before anyone could fully process what was happening, the two collided in a crash that killed both pilots, injured dozens of people, and shut down one of New York's most important airports. But what makes this story even more unsettling is that this was not some mid-air disaster in a storm or a mechanical failure over the ocean. This happened on the ground, on a runway, at a major international airport, in a place designed around strict timing, constant communication, and layers of safety meant to stop exactly this kind of thing from ever happening. So how does something like this happen? And what do we actually know so far? Let's break it down. Late Sunday night, March 22, 2026, an Air Canada Express flight operated by Jazz Aviation was arriving at LaGuardia Airport from Montreal. The aircraft was a Bombardier CRJ-900, a regional jet commonly used on short and medium-haul routes. On board were 72 passengers and 4 crew members. As the plane was landing, it collided with a Port Authority fire truck that was crossing the runway while responding to a separate emergency involving another aircraft. Captain Antoine was the pilot in command. First Officer Mackenzie Gunther was beside him, working the problem with him in real time. And what makes this story even more remarkable is that this was their first flight together. No long-established rhythm, no years of flying this exact pairing. Just training, experience, calm, and absolute trust in procedure when procedure suddenly became the only thing standing between life and catastrophe. The impact was devastating. The pilot and co-pilot did not survive. Multiple passengers were hurt, along with personnel in the fire truck. Reports said around 40 people were taken to hospitals, though many were later released. Still, even if most injuries were not life-threatening, the sheer violence of a landing collision like this is hard to imagine. For the people on that plane, one moment they were probably expecting the usual jolt of touchdown, and the next, they were in the middle of a deadly runway crash. And that's the part that really hits you. Air travel is built on routines. Passengers relax when they hear the wheels hit the runway because landing usually means the hard part is over. That appears to be what investigators are now trying to reconstruct. The weather may also become part of the story. Some reports described rain and wet runway conditions at the time. That does not automatically mean weather caused the crash, but it can affect braking, visibility, and overall situational awareness, especially during an already tense emergency response. Again, that's something investigators will have to sort out carefully rather than assume. The crash immediately disrupted operations at LaGuardia. Flights were halted, hundreds of cancellations followed, travelers across the region were affected, and one of the busiest air corridors in the country was thrown into disruption. But honestly, the airport shutdown is almost the least important part of this story. The real focus is on the human cost. 2 pilots lost their lives doing the job they had likely done countless times before. Passengers survived something they never could have expected at the very end of a flight. Emergency personnel responding to one incident were suddenly caught in another. And that raises a bigger question. How safe is the system when everything gets busy at once? Because this accident doesn't just sound like a random tragedy. It touches a much larger anxiety people already have about aviation right now. Air traffic control staffing and operational pressure have been major concerns in public conversation for a while. Was there a communication error? Was there a procedural failure? Was there confusion between runway and ground movement clearances? Was the emergency response itself managed correctly? Were there enough safeguards in place to stop conflicting instructions before they became deadly? Those are the questions investigators will be chasing, step by step. And to be clear, aviation investigations usually do not stop at the obvious answer. They are not just trying to explain what happened. They are trying to understand how to stop the next version of it. That's why the final findings matter so much, because this crash may end up saying something broader about modern airport operations. But in this case, the danger came right at the finish line. That makes it feel especially cruel. Now, before going any further, it's important to separate what is confirmed from what is still under investigation. The jet and the fire truck ended up on the same runway at the same time, and they collided during landing. Investigators from the National Transportation Safety Board and the FAA are looking into how runway access, air traffic control coordination, emergency response movements, and timing all intersected in those final moments. What is not yet confirmed is the full chain of responsibility. When a major accident happens, people rush to fill in the blanks. Social media does it, commentators do it. Sometimes even news coverage starts leaning towards simple explanations too early. But aviation investigations are incredibly detailed for a reason. Tiny factors matter, seconds matter, matter. A misunderstood instruction matters. Weather matters. Visibility matters. Radio traffic matters. One decision can make sense in isolation and still become catastrophic when combined with 3 other things happening at once. That's why this story is so disturbing. It is a test of how fail-safe modern aviation really is when pressure, timing, and human decisions all collide at once. And if there is any small good that can come from a tragedy like this, it will be in whether the investigation leads to changes strong enough to make sure this never happens again. Because on a runway, seconds matter, and at LaGuardia, those seconds changed everything. Subscribe to our channel for more content.